Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm glad I gave us that extra minute there. We picked up a good number of attendees in that extra minute. So I am going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar. So on behalf of agcareers.com, I would like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar entitled Resumes That Get Past the Robot. My name is Ashley Collins. I am the Education and Marketing Manager with agcareers.com, and I will be not only serving as your moderator today, but also as your presenter for our content this morning. During today's webinar, I hope to help you understand what exactly the job search robot is, how to tailor your resume to combat the robot that exists in the job seeker world, discover why keywords are important and which ones make a difference, as well as a few tips to help you build a resume that stands out in any situation and helps you to be successful in landing the job of your dreams in the agricultural industry, hopefully through agcareers.com. For those of you who have joined us most recently, I've shared with others that a copy of today's presentation is available in the handout section of your GoToWebinar control panel. You should be able to click on the expansion button to that particular header, and from there you'll be able to access and download today's slide deck for note-taking and also for future reference. Your lines are muted to help with the timing and the flow of the presentation, and we had a tremendous response rate from our job seekers, so we have a good number of people on the line today, so we want to make sure we're conscious of keeping those lines muted so that we don't have cluttered conversation and background noise. If you have not attended a webinar before, to give you a little bit of an idea of how the format takes place, during the presentation, the slides will move automatically on your screen as I share today's content. You may have to move your mouse around every once in a while to keep your computer from going into sleep mode if you have it in that particular setting. And if for any reason you have to shut down or you have any problems, you can rejoin today's webinar. You'll just need to follow the exact same instructions that you did initially to join us. And then finally, after today's webinar, we will be sending an electronic evaluation form to all of our attendees. If you wouldn't mind sharing your feedback via that survey that we send you, it would be greatly appreciated, as that will help us determine future topics of webinars that we might offer for our audience. So those are just a few welcome items. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself as your presenter today. I have been with agcareers.com since 2004, so right at the end of May, I celebrated 12 years being with the company. Actually started out in an internship role and then moved into various different functions within our business, and then about 7 years ago landing within our marketing department, and have worked in that capacity since that time. That allows me to, I kind of tend to specialize in our college and university audience that we work with, not only with them as job seekers, but also with any of our clients on the corporate side who are interested in getting connected with that age group. But having a role in education, that kind of reaches the entire gamut, and I'm certainly very passionate about helping people discover and be successful in their job search process to finding the job of their dream in the agricultural industry. So that's a little bit more about me and my background. Happy to have all of you with us today. So let's get started kind of getting into some of our content today. And, you know, entitling this webinar, Resumes That Get Past the Robot, we certainly may need to look at a little bit of the evolution of the robot. Now, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. I have seen the original Star Wars episodes, but not these most recent ones that have come out. So I'm sure there's someone on the line who can tell me if this is the original R2-D2 or if this is the updated version. But when I think about one of the first robots I was ever introduced to, R2-D2 certainly comes to mind. And then next, I remember watching the Jetsons as a child, and Rosie was their handy-dandy housekeeper robot. And I thought, you know, how awesome that would be as my mother had me doing chores around the home, that in the future we would have robots to clean our house And lo and behold, we have robot vacuum cleaners that exist in today's age. And ironically enough, I don't own one of these, but my mother-in-law owns 3. And I find it quite interesting when I go to her house and her vacuum cleaner robot chases me out of a room. I'm not sure if she's trained that specifically for her daughter-in-law or if it's a feature that comes on robot vacuum cleaners, but certainly becoming more popular today to have those. And so it's kind of a version of Rosie. And then we even have the Google car. I certainly consider that in today's robot age something that is a self-driven car that's out there. And I know there's a lot of debate and there's been a lot in the news about the Google car. But, you know, you're just thinking over just in the last 20 to 30 years, the evolution of the robot. And then here we are today talking about a robot that's part of the job search process. Looking at your resumes, certainly it's not necessarily in this form of a physical, human, similar robot type scenario, but we have this computer system called an applicant tracking system that is a robot that's part of the job search process for many of us. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that as we go. Wanted to kind of kick off with that little analysis of the history of the robot. And I'm sure I've left a couple out in there. I'm not a huge moviegoer, but I know there's been tons of movies about robots and how they're going to take over the world. And so not only are they taking over the world, but they're taking over the job search process. So let's talk a little bit more about exactly what is this robot that we're talking about in an applicant tracking system. So to look at some of the numbers that exist around why even this robot has been invented, to tell you a little bit on a national scale, some of the studies and the research that we've done in preparing for today, numbers like on average about 144 people apply for every entry-level position that is posted out there on the web or in some type of posted format to get the news to job seekers about a particular opening. And on average, 89 people apply for each professional or mid-level position that is advertised. The statistic you see there at the top about the majority of jobs receive between 11 and 15 applications per job board, that's in the specific niche job board world that agcareers.com exists in. So when you're thinking about some of the resources that you use to look for jobs, if you're using a niche site such as ourselves, something that's very specific, those are kind of the numbers that we are seeing reported to some of the groups that we belong to that track some of that data. And you can see up there that agcareers.com is averaging just nearly 12,000 jobs that are posted each month. So there's a lot of opportunity that exists out there, but there may not be a lot of people on the flip side of receiving those resumes to actually look through them. And the 2 stats that I've included there are actually from our agribusiness HR review. So those are specific to the agricultural industry, that the majority of people only have 1 to 2 staff members in human resources or recruiting in comparison to the number of employees that they have within their business. So there's not a ton of eyeballs on the employer side to look at all those applications that are coming in. One statistic I read shared that at one point Google received 75,000 resumes just in 1 week. And so if you do the math on that, so looking at 75,000 resumes, and if each resume gets about 6 seconds worth of view time, which I know is very sad given the tremendous amount of hours that go into putting a resume together. But if you do the math on that, 6 seconds times 75,000 resumes, that's 450,000 seconds or 7,500 minutes, which equates to around 125 hours that it would take to go through those resumes. And if you're working a 40-hour work week, that means it could take 3 days just to get through 1 week's worth of applicants. Now, I certainly know probably not everyone on the call today is applying to go work at Google, and not every employer is Google and receiving that high volume of resumes, but I just want to paint a picture for you of what it could be like to have to that type of volume and how much time is involved in going through those resumes, and that is why ATS systems have been invented. And another criteria that goes into that, another piece of data that that is available, is that only about 35% of candidates are truly qualified for the positions that they apply for. And we're going to talk about what is the percentage of people who actually make it through the robot system, and hopefully all of you on the call today can be in that just a little later kind of in our presentation. And so people in human resources, people in recruiting, talent acquisition, they really needed something that was more effective and efficient to help them get through the massive amounts of resumes that were out there that they were receiving for job openings that they had available. So a little comic here, but certainly I'm sure there are people, clients even of agcareers.com, that certainly feel like Ms. Peterson in this situation. And it's a great problem to have, that many people interested in an opening within a company, but a tool, a technology, a robot, the applicant tracking system was really born out of this need to have something that was more effective and efficient in the job search process. So let's talk a little bit more about what exactly this robot or this ATS system, that we'll call it from here on out, is designed to do for the company. So they utilize this system. It's a technology tool that helps employers manage applications, collecting them for them. Imagine it maybe like an email system for that particular employer, a piece of software or an application that they have installed within their business. It helps them to electronically screen out candidates by searching through keywords and mentions that are within that resume, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we continue on in today's presentation. It does help companies with maintaining and ensuring that they are compliant in the job search, in the applicant screening process. Especially under the Equal Employment Opportunity Act, employers must collect a good bit of data about the job seekers and the people who are applying to their jobs, so that they are sure that, so that if they have to report any data back to the federal government, that they have that available. So having this system, when you're dealing with that type of volume on the job seeker side, this particular system helps employers to collect that information and to quickly sort through it, so that they can very quickly, if they're needing to report on one particular component of information, to make sure that they can quickly answer questions about who exactly is applying to their jobs, who are they reaching out to with their job information, and how they're kind of doing that. So this system provides them the ability to do that as well. It also allows them to quickly pull some metrics in the hiring process, some measurables, so that they can identify who's in their database, who's applying to those jobs. That kind of goes into the maintaining compliance component as well, but also just helps them to see, do they need to push a particular job out to more people? Do they need to post it in different places? Things like that it does for them. It also allows them within a large company, if they do have multiple, people in human resources or recruiting who may need to access this information, it allows it to all be in one spot for them. And it also allows them to quickly share that information. So if one particular person is covering a certain type of job that they are recruiting for, then but they have some candidates that maybe would be a better fit for a coworker who's recruiting for a different role, they can very easily share that information through the applicant tracking system and with those other people who have access to it within the company that have access to the applicant tracking system. It also allows them to have a quick and easy tool for managing job opportunity communication. And this is very broad. By communication, I mean that it allows them to quickly say, post this job on agcareers.com, post this job on this site or that site that they may be interested in posting it to, so that they only have to post it once and it can push it out to multiple places on behalf of the company. It also allows them to communicate with the candidates very easily, so they can just, they're not having to sort through their emails that they may have to find a particular candidate and then email them individually. They can simply log into their ATS system and send some type of communication to a particular candidate. Now, I will just tell you, in all of my years of experience, I know that is the #1 complaint that job seekers have. And the ATS system has certainly elevated that complaint to the top, because many people feel that when you submit your application through some electronic system like this versus emailing it or actually physically handing it to someone, they feel like they go into a black hole. And certainly that is one of the beauties of the ATS system, is that employers can very quickly communicate back to that job seeker and let them know that they're qualified or they're not qualified based on where they rank in the system, which I'll explain in just a few slides. But it does fall on the shoulder of the employer to utilize that tool. You know, tools are only, a hammer can only be so good to you sitting in your toolbox. And if you don't actually pull it out of that toolbox and use it, it's not going to help you destruct anything or build anything that you may be looking to use it for. So it does rely on the employer to actually use those tools, but that is a tool that is available in most applicant tracking systems. It also allows them, they can very easily schedule interviews, linking up their ATS system with a calendar system that they may have, with some type of tool that they're using to reach out to job seekers so that they can input when they're available for an interview or any other type of scheduling that may need to take place. And ATS systems are also very environmentally friendly by helping us replace the paper resume or emailing and printing off and passing around resumes within a company. So to share another statistic with you, just kind of specific to agcareers.com, about 90% of the jobs that are posted on our website now go through an applicant tracking system. So this is in the process of applying to the job, the point that you get to when you are redirected to an off-site, to away from agcareers.com, to either copy and paste or upload or enter in more information about yourself and to include your resume. The 10% of jobs that don't use an applicant tracking system will have the ability for you to actually browse and attach your resume so that you can send it in an email format. You know, in researching for today, nearly every single one of the Fortune 500 companies uses an ATS system. It's very rare to find even, you know, all mid to large size companies are utilizing some tool like this to sort through, collect, and screen their candidates. And so this really is the reality of today's job search process, which certainly leads to the need to have today's webinar to help you to try to navigate so that you can get your resume, if you visualize this pile as an electronic system, to get your resume from this point in the process on up in that stack for that employer to look at. And if your resume is not formatted to work well with the applicant tracking system, no matter how qualified you may be for that particular job, human eyeballs may never see your resume. According to a job search service provider, PrepTel, only about 25% of applicants actually make it through the applicant tracking system. So hopefully after today, you'll have a better understanding to help you make it through the applicant tracking system that employers are utilizing. So let's look at exactly how that works from an employer standpoint. And from a job seeker standpoint for that matter. So what I've included a visual here, I have a teaching background, is a rubric. Whenever I was giving assignments to students, you had to write a paper. Those of you who are in college or those of you who have children or something, you may be familiar with like a rubric type system where there are points allotted to different criteria of that assignment. that's very much how the algorithm behind an applicant tracking system works. They assign points for different components of the resume, and then those resumes that fall within a certain point or percentage of that particular rubric are the ones who actually get passed on to the human eyeball for that employer or recruiter to see. So resumes with the high scores relevant to what the employer is looking for from a keyword standpoint or relevance of the keyword within that resume are moved up further for that review. And the software simply scores the resume to determine which candidates are most qualified to be higher up on that ladder. And every company utilizes a different threshold or cutoff point. So that's not something that I can necessarily teach you in today's webinar, is what your score has to be for that particular employer, because for every employer and for every job it's going to be different, and that's going to be set by the people on the backside who are actually overseeing that particular system. So success in getting through the applicant tracking system and navigating it isn't simply about the volume of keywords or phrases. It's having the right keywords within your resume. In particular, having unique keywords within your resume. And by unique, what I mean is these applicant tracking systems, they're able, this robot is able to see all of the jobs that that company has ever inputted into the particular software. And so it can scan through that system and determine which keywords and phrases are very specific to that particular job. Because all companies, or any company, if they've got 100 different job descriptions, there's going to be some similarities in those job descriptions. Certainly where they talk about the values of the company, the benefits of the company. Those are all things that are going to appear in all of their job descriptions. But some of the duties are going to be certainly different, but again, not all of them. And so this system is able to go through the ATS system and identify which of those words are very unique to that particular job. They also, hiring managers can apply filters once the actual resume has gone through this system and they're able to see how it scores. They can then look at some additional filters that they may plug into to the results that they get. And examples of those may be, based on the keywords and the relevance of your keywords within your resume, that gets you so many points. And then you get added on points if you fall within a particular geographic area. So therefore, having your contact information on your resume is important and certainly falls into this. And we'll talk about what that means if you're perhaps looking to relocate. They may also have some educational criteria. And so if in your resume the word master's or PhD or bachelor's or associate's degree, those may be additional criteria that get you more points within the applicant tracking system. And then it can also look at dates. This particular robot knows how to read the dates and determine how recently that particular skill set that they're looking for has happened to you in the history of your resume, and you may get a varying level of points based on that as well. And so it is, that's kind of a high-level overview. So let's look at the process a little bit more for how an applicant tracking system, what it actually does to your resume. And this was a nice visual that I found to help demonstrate that. So your resume comes in to this system, and the first thing it does is it parses it. That's a term that is used quite heavily in the recruiting world, is to parse a resume. And basically what that means is it strips all your beautiful formatting that you've put into your resume. It kind of strips that out, and it just pulls the important words. It throws out all the A's and the V's and the thes and whatnot, and it just pulls those very specific keywords that are important, and then it sorts them into the different criteria that the employer has indicated that they want to look at for that particular position. So in this example, they're looking at education, the contact information for the job seeker, for the candidate, what skills that they have, and what their former work experience is. And so it goes through that system electronically, and it kind of sorts it out, and then it produces a report for the employer. Now, at agcareers.com, we are a small employer ourselves, so we don't actually use a applicant tracking system. And so this is just an example that I found on the web to share with you, and it's got some different criteria of it, but basically you can see that, you know, if the candidate's name was perhaps bolded, you don't see that on the back side of the ATS system. If there were, imagine some lines maybe in this particular resume to kind of help break up the different sections within it, those are stripped out of the system. And you can see over on the left-hand side that the employer is able to see that they were looking for X number of keywords, and this particular candidate is completely missing 10 of those keywords. They partially matched 15 of those keywords in the process. And you can see in the blue part up at the top kind of a synopsis of the job description and what exactly those keywords were that were most important for the employer to find in that particular candidate's resume. Now, every system looks different. Again, this is just a sample that I was able to find in doing some research. And so don't get so hung up on this particular format of the report, because some systems may just list names and show the employer where that candidate scored. On a scale of 1 to 100, are they a 48, or are they a 68 or 62? And then the employer can determine, you know, at what point of that threshold do they actually want to open up and look at their resumes. So that's kind of what the report looks like from an employer standpoint. So you may be thinking at this point, well, we've got it figured out. Here it's just 11:30. We're only 30 minutes into this webinar, and I already know the solution. I'm jumping ahead. It's just I need to fill my resumes full of keywords so that I get the highest score possible. But that's where you really have to go back to the component that we discussed on the last slide about the relevance of those keywords. And so you can't overstuff your resume. That's a term that you'll find used quite often, and I travel a good bit in my job, so I love this visual of an overstuffed suitcase, because you're not going to get that in the overhead bin on the airplane. You're going to end up gate checking that sucker, or even having to check it all the way through to your final destination. And if anyone on the call today has done any traveling, you know that can certainly cause some disruptions in your travel plan. So here you have an example of a person applying to a marketing manager position, and they included this summary of themselves and took the word marketing and manager and manipulated it into a couple different ways there in that summary, just to try to get through that applicant tracking system. And the best analogy that I can think about to help you understand what that'll do for your resume is, imagine when you use Google and you search for something and you get your results and you click on them, and within just a few seconds of looking at that page that you've been directed to, you're able to tell, oh, this is not at all what I was looking for. You know, maybe I need to go back and put in different keywords or even different search terms. The same thing happens in an applicant tracking system. If you load your resume like this and say you score 100, that's going to look suspicious to the human eyeball, and they're going to know very quickly when they open your resume, if it's just completely covered with those bolded red words, then you've just overstuffed your resume with the keywords trying to get it through that applicant tracking system. And they're going to, just like you do, very quickly go right back to your Google search. They're going to go right back into the system and look at a different resume and totally skip over yours. So you're kind of the outlier in the system in that standpoint. And so that's not the solution to overstuff. You've really got to have a delicate balance of integrating the keywords into your resume. And it's certainly a skill that you'll perfect over time as you're going through this process. So the next question you may have is, okay, then you've talked about keywords. You've talked about how important it is that I include these in my resume, but how do I know what the keywords even are in the particular resume? And I'm going to share with you two different ways that you can go about identifying what those keywords may be depending upon the job description. The first example that I'll share with you is just the tried and true old-fashioned way of looking at a job description. And so this is an example for a scientist that you may see posted even on agcareers.com. And the differentiation in the coloring here is the differentiation between maybe some of those employability skills that they're looking for in the particular person, and then the technical skills that they're looking for. So highly motivated in a dynamic individual, that is in the job description, that's an employability skill or a soft trait that they're looking for. Whereas being a molecular biologist, being able to sample, prep, and library construction solutions, that's more of a technical skill that you may have. Semiconductor sequencing, that's a technical skill. Working in an extremely fast-paced environment, that's more of a soft skill. So you kind of get where I'm going with that. And so as you read through the job description, identifying those specific keywords, and then when you work on your resume, you integrate those keywords. And maybe you're not going to be able to integrate all of them, but the ones that are most applicable to you as a candidate for that position. This is also just a good method for you to determine whether or not this is the right job for you to apply for, so that you're not part of that 70-some% of applicants who are applying for jobs that they're not qualified for. You're part of that 35% that are qualified, and that's certainly going to help you to get through the system as well. And so printing off that job description and really sitting down and kind of going through, slowly reading it. Another resource that you may utilize to look at this type of information to identify keywords is your own professional network. So reaching out to individuals who you may know who also work at that particular company. LinkedIn is a great resource for you to do that if you have a good presence on LinkedIn. Looking at the job descriptions of other employees and looking for some of those titles or phrases or keywords that exist across the board in each of those that may be able to tell you something that you could include in your professional summary about yourself that would be important to the employer. That's another thing that you can do. Also, if you know of anyone who works in recruiting or human resources or hiring at any point, sharing the job description with them, having them look through it with you and pick out what are some of those very specific traits that the employer is looking for that you could integrate into your resume. And you can see in this particular example a pretty fair balance. I actually think it's a little heavier on that employability skill side versus the technical skill side. So, you know, there you've got to really drum in on your bullet points within your resume about how you've accomplished, how you've demonstrated your employability skills in the job. Another very useful method that you can do to help you identify what some of those keywords are is the word cloud method. And so what this involves is using a free service like Wordle, and I've included their website address there, going out, looking at a site like agcareers.com if you're looking to work for a particular company, and maybe pulling 5 or 6 of their job descriptions that may be similar to the one that you are interested in applying for, copying and pasting those job descriptions into one long like Word document, and then pasting that into Wordle. And what Wordle will do for you is create for you this word cloud where the larger the word is, the more frequent it is appearing across all 5 or 6 of those job descriptions. So then you know that that particular term should be integrated into your resume perhaps more frequently if it is applicable to you as the job seeker. There's a couple different of these word cloud type tools out there on the internet that are free for you to utilize. Wordle is just a pretty commonly used one. Some of you may know of other ones. But that's a nice method for you to very quickly identify what is being presented more frequently and across the board in those job descriptions. But again, the importance there is that you're not necessarily pulling from different companies, that the 5 or 6 positions that you pull are all from the same company, so they match the same desirable traits that they're looking for or desirable responsibilities that they are looking for in their candidates. So that's a way that you can identify those keywords to kind of help you through that process. So you know what the ATS system is. You know about the importance of the keywords. So let's look at some of the do's and don'ts to help you be successful in this process, some of the little behind-the-scenes tricks that you must know. And I start out with the most important point here is that you have to have a custom resume for every job. That's one of the things that the ATS system has done, and that takes a lot of time on your part. I know in putting on resume workshops and helping individuals with their resumes, close friends and whatnot, it's a lot of work to put together a resume. Getting a job ain't easy. If it was, then we wouldn't have the high unemployment rates that we do, and sites like agcareers.com wouldn't exist. And so you've got to put in that extra time and really customize your resume for the job that you're applying for. And once you get a basic resume built, you should very easily be able to sit down and spend 20 to 30 minutes making it individualized. If you get into a system where when you go to apply to the position, you always want to upload your resume versus copying and pasting it into a text box, because that's going, if you upload it from like a Word version and sending that in, it's going to allow the robot system of the ATS to go in and do some of that parsing that we talked about more effectively. You got to have just a plain resume. This is not the time to get creative. This is not the time to be looking for the really cool template for your resume that you want to put it in, because as I mentioned earlier, this ATS system is just going to strip all of that out. And so make your resume as plain as possible. That's not to say that you're not going to have one that is formatted more professionally on the side that maybe you would use in a situation where you've made a personal connection and you do get to email a resume, or you get to hand it to someone in person. But for what you upload into the system, you want it to be plain as possible. You actually want to remove, if you're using like the header in Microsoft Word or the footer option, you want to not do that, because it actually confuses the algorithm in the ATS system. Again, you don't want to overstuff your resume. I have seen resumes that have a section right at the very top that say keywords or traits of this person, and they've just bulleted out 20 words that describe them. That actually will throw off the algorithm of the system as well. If you have any, one thing all industries are notoriously known for, and I really feel like we're super notorious for this in the agricultural industry, is having a lot of acronyms. If you are including any acronyms in your resume, you want to also use the spelled out version of what you're trying to say in addition to the acronym, because it's very hard to determine on the employer side which term they're going to utilize. I mean, this is where looking at the job description helps you, but you still may not know how they've done that in the back system that they're utilizing. So I've included the example here of instead of just saying that you're AI certified, saying that you're artificial insemination certified, or however that may fall into play. Using bullet points versus paragraphs. Bullet points are easier for a human eyeball to read as well as an ATS system. They're looking for those very quick little short statements versus long sentences. It's easier for them to pick out more of those words and in the parsing process. You want to very clearly define the sections of your resume, and so saying this is the summary section and using that header of the summary. This is my work experience. this is my education. You don't want those to get confused, because as you were looking at that image earlier in the slide deck, those are the separators for that particular ATS system. So you want to make sure that those are very clearly labeled on your resume as it goes through the system. You don't want to use a PDF version, believe it or not. PDF versions of resumes are quite popular when emailing, because it kind of locks everything, makes sure nothing gets misconstrued in the look of your resume. But for an ATS system, Word versions are the best to submit. Not a rich text formatted version, obviously not a JPEG version, but just your regular old Microsoft Word is the particular tool you want to be using to build your resume. You also, as you do your bullet points, don't begin a bullet point or even a section of your work experience with the dates that you worked there. You want to put those on the back side. So the correct formatting here would be the name of the company that you worked for, the title that you had, followed by the date that you worked there. If you lead with the dates, it confuses the ATS system, the robot, and it may cause you to have a lower ranking score in that particular system. So don't lead off with the date in however you're formatting your resume. This next bullet point is a little difficult for me to even say, because I do, as I mentioned earlier, work with a lot of college students, and I preach constantly to college students that they should have a one-page resume, and how to focus in on what's important that you've done in college to get it into one page, and that every now and again 2 pages is okay. In an ATS system, when you're thinking about how they work, it's okay for you to be a little long-winded and have perhaps a longer resume, so that it gives you that opportunity to include more information. Now, you certainly don't want to push it to 4 or 5 pages, but if you go into 2 or 3 pages, it's not as damaging to you as it would be if you were handing that resume in a paper format. But here, this is where it comes into play again, that you have one version of your resume for an ATS system, and then you maybe have it in a more condensed version in case you're asked to email it or to bring it to the interview if you make it that far in the process, so that it's a little more condensed for that employer. You've got to use proper capitalization and punctuation. That's going to help the system to pull out the specific keywords within your resume. Spelling certainly comes into play. You don't want to use any type of logos or graphics or tables. You know, I've seen people who include like a QR code on their resume, and when you scan it, it takes you to like their LinkedIn profile. You would want to remove that in a resume that you're sending through an employer's applicant tracking system. You want to make sure you include your contact information. We talked earlier about the fact that that may be an extra criteria that the employer plugs in there, is that they're looking for people within a specific zip code. And so if your resume has your full and complete address on there and has your zip code, they're able to hone you into that particular geographic area. Font-wise, for an ATS formatted resume, you want to go no smaller than an 11-point font. You don't want to mix your fonts, so you want to keep the same font throughout your resume. And you want to choose sans serif fonts, such as Arial, Georgia, Veranda, or Tomahawk. Those are the easiest to read from a font standpoint for that particular, for ATS systems. And so you also want to avoid, I've seen some resume templates that may, like below where it would say like work experience, you may have a line going all the way across from a visual standpoint to kind of break your different sections. An ATS system is going to throw that out, and depending upon the algorithm that it's using, the more of those that you have in your resume, the more likely it may be to cause you to have a lower score, because it's had to throw so much out in the process. I've listed another website here. This was something interesting that I came across, jobscan.co. They have, your first 5 that you do in here are free, but then it goes into a paid system. But this is actually where you can plug in the job that you're applying for and your resume, and it will let you know how you may potentially score in an ATS system. Now, there are hundreds of different applicant tracking systems, softwares available, so it's hard to tell, or you can tell because when you go to apply to the job, you may notice in the URL on the web page which one you're using. Some common ones are like Taleo. That's a very common one. Taleo. PeopleSoft, I think, is another. There's a couple different ones, but it's hard to know. This JobScan website that I went to is not specific for the different pieces of software. It's kind of across the board, so I wouldn't say that it's going to be a direct match, but it's certainly a very useful tool for you as you're going through this process. But again, it's only like I think your first 5 attempts or usages that are free, and then they go into a paid model to help you go through that system. So those are just some quick do's and don'ts that you want to include in an ATS resume, and some resources that you may use. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that the goal that you have in mind here is to get your resume in front of the human eyeball. And so if you've made it through the robot system and you've reached the human eyeball, people are the ones hiring people at the end of the day. And so what are some things that are important for you to remember across the board when you're putting together your resume? And the first and foremost that I want to mention is being honest, because I think that's one thing that's happened with applicant tracking systems and with the increased knowledge that job seekers are getting about keywords and how these systems work, is that people tend to fudge a little on their resume to help get through that system, and they think that once they do and they're in the interview process, they can maybe sort all that out. Honesty is so important. When that recruiter or hiring professional is going to be able to pick up in some of their early conversations with you whether or not you actually possess those traits. And so don't get so hung up in getting these keywords into your resume that you become dishonest in the process. So that is first and foremost the most important. The second thing is the importance of spell checking, not only for an ATS system, because if you've misspelled a word, then that's one less keyword that you're going to match up with in that system. But even when it gets to the human eyeball, spell checking is so important. We don't have time, but I could tell you 15 stories about misspelled words, everything from things being humorous to being just humiliating from misspelling a word in a resume. And so you've got to do that spell checking, get other people to look at your resume and help you with the spell checking component of it. Be very conscious of grammatical errors. Those certainly affect you not only in an ATS system, but also when a human eyeball is looking at your resume. Very important. Keeping your resume up to date. I suggest going in every 30, if you're very active in your job search process, going in every 30 to 60 days and taking another look at your resume and saying, you know, what skills have I gained in the last 30 days that maybe I could include differently on my resume. You want to keep the formatting consistent. So by that, I just mean, you know, obviously I've talked about having something that's formatted a little bit more professionally versus just a plain Jane version for the ATS system. But you do want to keep it somewhat consistent. You don't want them to look completely different from each other, and you don't want to have formatting that starts out one way in your resume and then like starts out in paragraph form and then ends in bullet form. You need to keep that consistent throughout, and that also goes for your grammatical standpoint of your resume. If you're using periods at the end of your bullet statements in your first section, you need to keep that going throughout the entire resume. Certainly want to make sure that you're utilizing a professional email address and your contact information. I've also probably got about 15 minutes worth of stories of crazy email addresses that we've seen. And you want to keep your contact information up to date. Just in the last year, I went to call a candidate who was applying for a job within agcareers.com, and I got the guy's father on the other end of the line. There had been like a cell phone switch that had taken place, but he had not updated his cell phone number on his resume. And so I got to talk to dear old Dad before I talked to Johnny about the job that he was applying for. So you've got to make sure you keep that information up to date. Tailoring your objective statement or even your professional summary. Objective statements tend to be more the norm amongst new graduates in the job search process, whereas mid-level professionals, you may have more of a professional summary that just a little bit more about you and what you may bring to that particular employer versus a new grad saying, this is why I want to come work for you and this is my objective to get this particular position. But you want to tailor those, and this goes right back to that first bullet point on the last slide about you've got to customize your resume for every position that you apply for. That really will make a huge differentiation in getting your resume up closer in that particular pile of the employer's information. Utilizing quantitative data. This is a huge differentiator that the couple hundred of you who are on today's call are going to now know to set yourself apart in the job search process. Resumes that include statements like you increased production by 25% in this particular arena, or you reduced operations backlog by 50% for the fiscal year in 2009, or you were able to grow the company's social media presence by X percentage. That is tried and true data that not only an ATS system is going to be able to read, but also the human eyeball is going to see as very favorable in your resume. So anytime you can put quantitative data to your particular bullet points that you're utilizing is going to help be a differentiator for you. And then starting your bullet points with action verbs. Words like led or created, delivered, managed, implemented, increased. We have a huge alphabetical list of these that you can access on agcareers.com in our newsletter archive section to help you identify what are some of those action verbs that you can integrate into your bullet statements within your resume. Those are just a couple, just a very random selecting of what I would say are common things that people forget to do or do improperly that cause their resume to be lower in that stack and perhaps in the trash can. So these are just, again, very high-level reminders of things that you need to do to help you to be successful in the job search process. And one last thing that I want to end by letting you know about, somewhat along the topic of ATS systems, when you create a resume that you may send through an applicant tracking system, you may also, when you're doing that, it gets housed into that employer's database of resumes. And if you think way back in the beginning of the presentation, we talked about if the employer is utilizing the tools that are available to them within the applicant tracking system, then it's a better situation for everybody involved. They may have that tool of now your resume is in their database, and you may be qualified for a position they might advertise for in 60 to 90 days, different from what you were applying for when you put it into that system. And so they may reach out to you futuristically. I'm not promising you that every employer does that, but many do utilize their applicant tracking systems in that way. And you may be asked a question in the process of actually applying to that job. Would you like your resume to be housed in that employer's robot applicant tracking system database so that they can contact you later? Well, you can also utilize the resume database that agcareers.com has available to you. And this is, again, in your handout section where you'll find today's slide deck. You'll also find a handout on how to upload your resume to our system. And if you utilize a more generic, maybe an ATS type resume that you've created, it's a very similar system where employers actually have to pay a fee to access our resume database and to get in there and to search jobs, to search for candidates proactively. So a perk of having your resume in our database is we just announced at agcareers.com that we're going to be offering virtual career fairs. this fall. We have 2 currently on the calendar, and the event that is on September 27th is going to be exclusively for those job seekers who have their resume within our database. So hopefully you've gained some knowledge today so that you can spiff up and work on your resume, create an account with us, which you can do at no charge, and upload your resume to our system, and then you will receive your invitation to be part of this virtual career fair. It's a very cool technology that allows you to attend a career fair from anywhere and to utilize like a chat room type technology to talk with employers. And so we are reaching out to our employers right now to make sure they're aware of these events that will happen this fall. And so you'll need to have your resume uploaded within 2 weeks of that September 27th date in order to be to receive the invitation. There is no charge to attend these virtual career fairs from a job seeker standpoint. So just an additional method that you may use in your job search process, and hopefully you got some information today to help you to do that. So with that, we're going to end today's webinar. If you have any follow-up questions, you can certainly reach out to us at the agcareers@agcareers.com email address. I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend and that you have nothing but happy robots in your future as you are utilizing the applicant tracking systems that are a part of today's job search process. Thank you all for attending, and again, as a reminder to be on the lookout for the evaluation survey that will be sent out following the end of today's session. Have a great weekend, and thank you so much.